So my name is Sjöberg, and I don't know how to describe myself. I hate this question generally because it's like I've been working with a lot of different parts of culture and visual arts. So I think I would place myself in a category of the changer, maybe, because I don't like the established order in anything. So I like to make small cracks in the order to make it change and shift to somewhere, and or towards something different. The reason why I work or used to work with arts is the idea behind it as a visual communicator about things in the world that maybe necessarily aren't right or have a value that you can't describe necessarily in other ways, and just generally kind of represents to me, or pure good art represents to me, a social change towards better, and that's the reason why I've worked with it. Then the art world itself doesn't really comply with that, and this is maybe the struggle that I have with the art world, so what the art represents and then what the art world actually does. And also I suppose art represents newness, or something new, something that changes, and this is something that's important to me. Change, always changing and always kind of renewing yourself and always going towards something that you haven't experienced yet. Well, I think entrepreneurship in itself is like perhaps the only way of being able to do whatever you want. So that's how I don't really differentiate being an artist from being an entrepreneur, because it's just a different word for the same thing. You basically have the choice and the freedom to do what you want to do in a slightly different structure. So entrepreneurship maybe is a more financially structured whole, but whilst artism is maybe more creatively kind of a space that you create something within. But entrepreneurship is also a space that you create something within, whatever that may be. I mean, you may want to take the road of entrepreneurship where you make, I don't know, a nice game and make trillions of euros with it, or build a kauppa and then, or like a supermarket, and then you know, have like an established franchising concept, or you create something like what I did was a cultural management slash development organization or company that didn't really have a vision except for making arts more available to people, like normal people, cracking away the elitism within visual arts. That was like maybe my vision within Art Shortcut, which was my company. My sort of position toward entrepreneurship is, I think it's just a tool, something to utilize in order to create something new. I don't want to call myself an artist. That's not, for me it's not something that resonates well. But I think I work in the same way as many artists do, in a sense that I develop concepts and create and make them happen in one way or another. I think my most important skill is that on the one hand I care what others think, but on the other hand I don't care at all. So I'm sort of it's like a juxtapositioning where you kind of sense what people think, and that can be very tough sometimes. But then on the other hand, you don't have limits to what you want to do. So if I really want to do something, I'll do it no matter what. So I think that's similar to an artist way of thinking, in a sense that you have to be able to not care what others think, and just kind of believe in whatever you're doing and do it. So I think doing it is maybe the most important skill set that you can have. then all these things where you know sort of can create possibilities, can combine possibilities, can seek possibilities. I think those are important skill sets within the creative field, and then also just to be able to kind of say out loud or somehow like either say it, write it, make it a visual story in one way or another, and kind of maybe communicate it to whoever you are communicating it to. I think that's maybe the sort of most important skill sets. I don't know if you can, like I'm sure that you can learn to become more self-operated and self-motivated and stuff like that. I mean, I'm sure that those are skill sets that anything you can learn, anything if you want to learn it. But I think it's an attitude question. It's more, do you want to? Are you willing to? What does it take? Because obviously, you do something, you sacrifice something else. I mean, there's just not, there aren't situations where you can have it all in. So I think you can't really teach the attitude necessarily, but you can create a fruitful grounding for the attitude by being open to whatever it may be. So I think closed minds and kind of limits and limited thinking, i.e. with that I mean limited thinking in the sense that you have certain specific rules and you can't do this because of that or whatever. That kind of thinking limits entrepreneurial thinking, because the whole point with artists or entrepreneurship is to change things in one way or another. I might want to separate that in like three parts, in a sense that the art education that is in Finland, I mean, it's in many ways very good. There is a lot of content and skill issues are excellent. I mean, very, very good, world class. But I think the problem is that the biggest problem is the art world that you are kind of creating artists for. That art world is. If I'm, obviously I'm caricaturing here, but the funding systems have been created in early 1900s, and the world still circles around those systems that have been changed a little bit here and there and whatever, but on the whole, the kind of framework or the way of thinking is how it was 100 years ago, and this is a big problem. I mean, if you then the teaching also is kind of maybe directed towards that way of thinking, and this creates a problem because you can't sort of work in these methods in this world today. So isolating artistic education into its own little world of 6 or 7 or 8 years of working within the school or working within the art world or working within some small circle of known people who know the world doesn't create an artist that can communicate outside of the school world. And I think this is one of the biggest problems the Finnish art schools have, is that the artist isn't educated alongside the real world. It's educated, or he or she is educated within a box that's quite closed. And yes, this might be good for kind of the sort of value of content, if you want to call it. That's a really bad word for it, but a value of artistic thinking and kind of individual thought processes, but I really don't believe that that's the case, because there are, if you look at international art education, this is obviously now again stereotype, but it's much more involved with the social world and the society in itself, and or the society at large, which also creates very good and very sort of independently thinking artists that are able to maneuver in the world outside of the school. And this, I think, is one of the most important skills that you should teach anyone who is within whatever education it may be, but especially in an artistic education where your profession is to make change in one way or another. And if you are thinking about that, whatever it may be, in your own little circles, you will never sort of achieve change because you're not in touch with the real world. I think the one thing that was really surprising to me, I mean, I studied in the, like I went from a very sort of Finnish-Swedish little circle into the UK to study, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to study and whatever, so I just thought like, okay, history of art, that's really, yeah, sounds good. And so I went to study thinking that, okay, if I don't like it, I'll stop. But then it was quite interesting, but the thing was that I went to a university in the UK that was very kind of left, first of all. It was a new modernist, well, from the 60s, but in the UK that's a really new university. It was a very kind of forward-thinking university. And I mean, the art like, you know, they rank in the UK, all of these universities. So in the art history field, it was the top three. Cambridge and Courtauld and Sussex were like the top three. So it was a really excellent education in many ways. And the thing that I learned there was this questioning everything. So do not let the status quo be what it is, but your position as a whatever you do within this field is to question the establishment in a sense. Then when you come to Finland, the way, like when I came back here 2003, the sort of establishment was quite established in a sense, and you would not question this side. And even the issue that my career pretty much has gone through is talking about art and money together, and the sort of ridiculous discussion that is going on in Finland about autonomy, and if you get money from someone, then does that mean that you as an artist are commercial and whatever? I mean, what are you supposed to live on as an artist if you don't have money? I mean, I still don't get this, but anyway, so I suppose this shows that in 2003, 2004, when I applied to do a PhD at Helsinki University History of Art department, they were like, oh my God, I mean, you cannot do anything that has to do with money and art in our department. And this is 10 years ago. Oh, okay, 12 years ago. It's not that long ago. So you can just imagine that I'm sure things have changed over the past 12 years, but not that much. So this just explains how the establishment thinks. You know, it's the status quo, and it's, you know, as long as it's kind of philosophically right, or you know, you kind of talk about the free arts or whatever that means. Like 90% of the artists I have worked with, they are super interested in creating a difference in their way, and I think that's the value in it. But then they are steered towards a certain way of working. And this is the problem, I suppose. It's the road that you kind of are taught. But I think this is in a general educational problem. Like if you study economy, this is the kind of person you become. If you start engineering, this is the type of person. I mean, obviously these silos are being broken up now completely. And say in 20 years' time, the value of education is going to be completely different. I mean, it might not even be valued the way it is valued today. People will be becoming like life artists or whatever, you know. So they will, because hierarchies are kind of melting down in a sense. But I think freedom isn't something that's given to you. It's something that you take.
Yeah.
So if you can't take freedom outside when you're in touch with society, then you're not an artist, I think. I mean, if you sort of expect someone to give you a box and space to, you know, create whatever you create, what's the value in that? No value, I think. I mean, if it's in touch with the world and you sort of listen to 50 different opinions and then you still make up your own mind, that's freedom. When you're able to make up your own mind. We're all free in Finland. I mean, come on, you know, we don't have any freedom issues here. And artistic freedom is like entrepreneurial freedom, or freedom to choose your, I don't know, your orientation, freedom to have children, not have children, freedom to, I don't know, like get married, not get married, freedom to live your life, you know. I think that's where equal. I mean, it's the autonomy. That's maybe this is a good explanation of the world, the art world that's structured in the early 1900s when the world wasn't free. So the artist was the kind of the only place that you know, and may I add, it was the male artist, but that was able to kind of say whatever they wanted to say about social structures and hierarchies and issues, and kind of, you know, a little bit make cracks in the wall. But this world doesn't exist anymore. We are in a very different world nowadays, and I think this kind of makes the discussion of freedom for an artist very redundant, pretty much. Now, having stepped out of the art world a little bit, I can totally see that we in the art world believe that we have a lot of value, but then when you come outside of the art world, the value that we think is there is something that the others don't give a don't care anything. I was going to say something worse, but don't care about. So the problem is that when you work inside a circle with the same people, in the same customers, in the same sort of world, you might get like 5 new customers per year or whatever, which is quite little. And those who become customers are already, you know, have been in the sort of outer circle for quite a long time before they actually enter inside, because this visual, and I'm especially talking about visual arts now. The visual arts sector is very closed. And when we think that the value that we create, or an artist creates, or whatever, is something X, and then the public thinks it's Y, and when these two do not meet, it's quite difficult to even start talking about what is the value. So, and makes the discussion of value really quite redundant in a sense. Then of course comes the issue of autonomy, and in the sense that if you start creating something for the public, then is that valuable then because it's created for the public? And again, this discussion is a bit weird, because art's main focus and point is to create some kind of a dialogue, or because if it's a monologue, it's not really that interesting necessarily. But you always have somebody who you are sort of hoping to hear opinions from, or talk to, or create, let the work that you have created maybe live on somehow. So here comes the sort of bridge, in a sense, where the value of artism is maybe evaluated, in a sense that if you are still able to keep your kind of sense of freedom, or your own vision, or whatever you want to create, in dialogue with those who think that the value of your work is Y, then I think you are sort of somewhere on the right path. I mean, of course, as an artist, if you want to sort of start creating your own kind of traditional path within the arts, so you want to go into certain galleries, you want to have certain buyers, you want to, you know, have this sort of traditional way of working, then obviously the network is very important. So you need to get to know people, you need to talk with people, you need to be active, you need to invite them to your studio, you need to talk with them, you need to liaise with them like in anything else. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you get possibilities and options, but I do think that a lot of what is shown in Helsinki art field today, or maybe also in Österbotten, is through connections. So somebody knows somebody who they trust, who knows somebody else who knows you, who then said your art is really interesting, and you know, got you the opportunity to go and show your CV and your portfolio and whatever. So from this sense, yes, it's very important. But then if you want to create your own work and your own place in the world, I think today's world is really not based on networks per se. It's based on courage to be able to contact people. Because you can contact Donald Trump if you, I don't know who would want to, but if you want to, on Twitter, and he's the president of the United States, you know. So if that already showcases how the world has kind of become a very small place. So hierarchies do not necessarily exist on the same level as they used to be. So 20 years ago, to get a meeting with the director of Atheneum was actually probably quite difficult. So you needed networks to do that. But today, I mean, you can just call them up and say, hey, I want to come and meet you. Whether or not you get there is another question. But so I think you just need courage to take the phone in your hand or email. No, I don't think it matters where you live, but it matters who. In this context, the networks matter. So if you have like if I was an artist, I would definitely go to New York or London and start networking there, and wouldn't bother myself with Helsinki. I mean, because like Finnish art per se as a brand is not interesting. I mean, it's a periphery somewhere here. You know, people are like, oh, is Finland, I don't know, is it next to Australia or something? You know, this is what you get sometimes. Well, maybe I'm being a little bit sort of naughty here, but you get my point. You know, it's not like of course Finland has its value. I'm not saying that, but Finnish contemporary art per se is maybe it's hot in some sense. Maybe it's a good thing to be a bit different nowadays. I don't know, but if you want to get into the art market or the art world on the established level, then go to London or go to New York and start creating a career there, because that's where the people who make these decisions for real live.